Hello everyone and welcome back to AustinPlus, where today we are talking about the Sony Spider-Verse. More importantly, because obviously Spider-Man is carrying on as it is in July or next month, but the Sony Spider-Verse is officially concluded. But Sony Spider-Verse had a lot of potential, a universe that was solely built around the Spider-Man characters without a Spider-Man himself. At first it worked, and then it got bigger, and then it just completely fell apart. So what actually happened? So today we are discussing the rise and fall of the Sony Spider-Verse. We are talking about what went wrong with the characters, what the major problems were, what they could have done, but more importantly, why this was meant to crash and burn. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, to understand why it went wrong, you actually have to understand why this thing happened. Sony's plan was to build a cinematic universe using a wide range of Spider-Man related characters that they had still owned, focusing on the villains and anti-heroes and side characters instead of just Peter Parker. Now, on paper, this did make sense and it was a good idea, but because Spider-Man has one of the richest supporting cast in comics, removing him also removed the central figure that connects all of these characters into one, creating an immediate structural challenge. And I think that's where they kind of fell off. It did have potential, but they needed to introduce a Spider-Man at some point, or it wasn't going to work. It simply just wouldn't. Don't get me wrong, there was early success with the likes of Venom, because the first Venom film proved that the idea could work commercially, even if it wasn't critically praised, as audiences connected with its chaotic tone, humor, and dynamic, especially between Eddie Brock and Venom. Everyone loved that. Its success showed that a Spider-Man adjacent character could carry a movie on their own, giving Sony confidence to expand further. But I do think that is where it all fell pretty quickly, because Venom 2 and 3, as much as they weren't as good as the first one, I do think they tried to feed as much as possible off the first one. Now, the other big issue was that this universe expanded far too quickly. It went from like 1 to 50. It was incredibly expansive, so damn quick. Following the success from Venom, Sony began rapidly expanding the universe with projects like Morbius and Madam Web, but this expansion came before a strong foundation that was established. Now, instead of building a cohesive narrative, the films often felt disconnected, with inconsistent tone and unclear direction, now making this harder for audiences to understand what the universe was actually supposed to be. I am one of those people, because we had Morbius, a character that hadn't seen the big screen. We had Madam Web, another character that had never seen the big screen. Whereas Spider-Man, Madam Web was a character I was like, yeah, you could do a lot with that, especially with the cast members. Like, you could do a lot. How they bottled it, I have no clue. Now, this all led to a very, very big identity problem, because the biggest issues of this universe was that it was never defined by an identity. It constantly shifted between darker tones, comedic elements, and unclear connections to the MCU, which is what people wanted in the end. They could do it, they just chose not to, and which led to their inevitable downfall. However, Venom, I think, is where we're going to get a lot of MCU connection, which is what everyone wanted since 2018 when this all started. By the way, think about it. 2018, the last film to come out of them, I think, was Kraven, which came out in 2023 or 4? I think it was 2024. That's not a lot of time. That's 6 years. And obviously you had strikes in between that, and you also had the COVID. So yeah, that's not a lot of, it fell off very damn quickly. Without a consistent vision, the universe just struggled to establish a clear tone of purpose, which made it very difficult for audiences to fully invest in it, like myself. Now, I keep on coming back to this, but I will, but the biggest, I think the most significant problem towards the end was this absence of Spider-Man. As many of these figures tied directly to him, Madam Web, that was the one where I was so fed up with it. I was just like, Spider-Man needs to be in this, because Madam Web is probably the most prominent and linked to Spider-Man. They did have this like Spider-Man like Team U version in it, but without the central figure, their motivations feel weaker, their stories feel less connected, and the overall universe just lacks a stronger anchor to hold everything together, as many of these characters are directly tied to him in both their origin and their purpose. Venom they did right. I know people shit on number 2 and 3, but I think they did Venom right, and that's why I think he has so much more potential. Now, there was obviously critical reception and audience reactions to this whole universe, which is that it had a very mixed reception, where some films found an audience despite negative reviews, but while others also widely criticized the struggle to gain traction, which is, I think, what this universe wanted from the very beginning. This created a situation where the franchise remained visible but lacked consistent credibility, making it harder to build a long-term with trust with viewers. It was never going to last. It just never was going to last. They got so many big actors to do it, and it didn't work. Going back to the MCU stuff, the biggest, I think, annoying thing was that there was a multiversal confusion, because the use of the multiverse added in another layer of confusion, and because with references to other Spider-Man properties and the MCU that was never fully paid off or was clearly explained, just made it fall so much shorter than it could. I think it could have lasted another year if they didn't do this. But instead of expanding the universe in a meaningful way, these elements often made it feel more disconnected and uncertain. There was a timeline that they set up with Adrian Toomes in Morbius that could have led somewhere, but they just fucked it. There were several missed opportunities in this universe, and it could have strengthened it to a point where no one ever would realize, including the potential for a Sinister Six, stronger crossovers between characters, and a clearer long-term narrative direction. Many projects felt like a setup for something bigger that never truly just materialized. Chameleon did that well. Craven, Father didn't make sense, and how he got his powers didn't make sense either, and was so generic. But they could have changed that and retconned it, and it would have solved it. Why didn't they? It felt like it was falling apart, I would say, after, as Madam Web came out. The decline of Sony's Spider-Verse isn't just about the individual films underperforming, but about a lack of direction, consistency, and a central identity. Without a clear plan or a strong foundation, the universe just began to feel uncertain. And that uncertainty just translated into its reduced audience interest. And people asking now, is there still a future for Spider-Verse? No. There is no future for this thing to recover except through Venom. As the characters and concepts themselves, while they did remain strong, it did require a clear vision, better storytelling, and they couldn't do that in 6 years. You can make a drastic change in 6 years, especially with all the time, but it just was never going to work. So, what happened to Sony's Spider-Verse? Sony's Spider-Verse, it had potential to build something unique, but it never figured out what it wanted to be. And in a universe built around Spider-Man trying to exist without him, might have been the biggest mistake of all. It didn't fail because of the idea that was flawed, but because the execution lacked focus and consistency, with rapid expansion and unclear direction, weakening what could have been a strong and unique franchise. Just made it fall so much shorter than it had to. But without further ado, folks, that is the end of today's video. I do hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and comment what you would like to see on the channel. But I hope you have an amazing day as always, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye. Yeah.